Survivor Specialist Phil and Alexa are back, and we finally have our second Survivor Season 41 tell-all. Today we are joined by Evvie, Jagoda. Close, right? Good. Perfect. Nailed it. Our second member of the Yase tribe. We've got 2 interviews. We've gotten both members from Yase, so everything from Xander can be debunked in the next hour and a half, 2 hours. But thanks for joining. I know we were trying to do this right around Christmas time, and then everything just got chaotic with all of our lives. So I'm glad we finally got this on the books, and we're pretty much a month removed now from Survivor. So how's that feeling?
Yes, it's good. I mean, we're a month removed. I also had COVID like right after the finale. So I feel like that was a whole lifetime ago. This is like
pre and post.
Yes, exactly. I'm a new person. So yeah.
Well, we're glad you're feeling better. I know we talked about this a little bit before we went live, but how does it feel to be like a month removed from the finale?
Yeah, I feel like it's nice because I mean, I'm sure viewers can imagine, but it's hard to like really overstate how much when you're watching it, you really like feel yourself go back into that mode, like, it's been months and I feel like between, leaving Fiji and coming home, I had a lot of, regrounding in regular life and things like that. And then watching it again, your heart is racing. Like really, it just like gets you right back in it. I'm watching the finale again, so many, even though I was on the jury for all those were like, I remember very vividly watching those things happen. So it's kind of nice to like get to breathe a little bit and be able to think about the season, more broadly than just the exact, finale stuff. So I'm glad to get you guys now.
Yeah. And how weird was that though? Like every other season in the history of Survivor has had this like reunion. Everybody comes back together and everybody talks about it. And you get to like really air it all later. And here you guys all had to air it right away. Right away. That was it. And that was your really last chance to speak on it until you're getting to start doing these post-game interviews. Because even when you're doing your post vote out interview, you can't really say everything that you want to say. So how weird was that like there was no reunion? It just kind of ended and then it was over.
Yeah, it was very, very strange. And I think a lot of us were like holding out hope that maybe there still would be a reunion, even though obviously we knew we filmed that after show segment. But yeah, it was weird because I mean, I think in the moment of doing that reunion, I thought like, that was cool. Like we talked about what happened, but you don't, I think, realize until, now watching the show, it's so different to see the edit and it's so different to see, what the audience is thinking and feeling and kind of, in some of the things that we talked about in the after show about, the merge idol play and like Shan stealing the vote, like we were telling the stories from our perspective, not thinking about how what the audience already saw and what the audience might need, what misdirected on or, so it's just really different to not get the audience impact, which I think the nice thing about the reunion is being able to like tell your story, knowing what people are thinking your story was, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like a completely different kind of therapy, I feel like, because now it's almost like you deal with the very, very difficult aspect of playing the game, but not the probably equally as difficult part of like being on social media during the game. To not jump all the way to the end, how was it as a player to have like the champagne and pizza party like on TV? Because from our side, it was cool. Xander obviously wasn't crazy about it. How was it for you?
I mean, I felt like I honestly felt just so bad for especially Xander and Deshawn during the whole thing. And I was like sitting right behind Deshawn and he was just so like defeated, you know what I mean? Like quite literally. And like, I think, as one of the earlier jurors, I had a lot of time already to I had already made peace with my game and everything like that, as much as you can in whatever 9 days of jurying. But it's just, for them, it was just so fresh that it was just weird, like, and also to not be able to even like, we literally went straight from our jury seats to there. Like there was no even second to talk to Erica or Deshawn or Xander or anything. And I just felt like, yeah, it's weird to talk about them in front of them without getting to have to talk to them at all. You know what I mean?
Especially since you just kind of not roasted them, but you pointed out their flaws and their positives for the last hour.
And frankly, like Deshawn and Xander were people that I had much closer like relationships with than Erica. So I really felt like I wanted to like talk to them and also just like felt for them as humans who I knew really well. Like Xander, I spent so much time with. Yeah, it was weird, but it was also kind of, I mean, I think being on Survivor in general is just surreal the entire time. It's like every time we walked to the tribal, it was just like, I'm freaking on Survivor. Like, I'm looking in my TV and somehow I'm like sitting in it. So to then have this like insane surrealism of like, here's champagne, and it was just
yeah. What was like as like the giddy fan, what was the coolest part about being on the show? Like it seems like the behind the scenes kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like talking to Jeff, which is funny because to me, like as a fan, I wasn't a huge like Jeff fan. Like, I don't know, just like his character of like, I'm serious and like, you know, like
his meme of himself.
Exactly. Like none of that super relates to me, but like real life Jeff, I feel like the major difference was just seeing just like how much he loves Survivor. Like it's crazy. Like, and the fact that he's able to, you know, he loves it. He's exuding that. And he just like does like, there's no cuts for Jeff to like redo something. You know what I mean? Like Jeff just like performs Survivor. And I feel like that's what makes it feel so like real, is that like, he's just doing it. Like even the thing that stuck out to me was in the do or die thing with Deshawn, like that is an entire thing that Jeff just like facilitated this whole scene. And it's like, there's no cuts. Like he just said it. You know what I mean? And it's like, was so freaking epic. So it's like, yeah, he's honestly just like impressive. And
yeah, his one-liners, like he didn't plan them. They just actually come up.
Yeah. And tribal and everything. He's just like a master facilitator. Like it's very, very impressive.
I love it. I love it. After Alexa and I pretty much spent the last, 4 months ripping Jeff, it's good to hear some positive.
I love that about him, though. He's all. I may disagree with some of his choices, but he, like, his passion and love and facilitator is like the perfect word. Like I remember watching earlier seasons and I was like, he's nervous. He doesn't know what to say. And now it's like, he doesn't even think about it.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, and I clearly have issues with some of the, you know, production decisions as well. But I do think a cool thing, not so much like with the audience. I don't feel like Jeff is very responsive necessarily to like Twitter or anything like that. Like clearly not.
Barely.
At him and he won't respond.
Right. But
he's better.
Right. But like he did like allow, like, for example, after the whole like hourglass twist, which I feel like was probably the most controversial thing. Like, you know, Danny was so mad about that. And at Tribal, like literally they went back and forth about it for like 10 minutes. And Jeff like totally was like, I want to hear I want to understand what you're feeling. I want to talk it through. Like, actually was like entertaining it, which I thought was like very surprising.
Yeah, that's cool though. And I guess like if there's anyone to listen to, it's probably somebody who's directly playing rather than like a million people on Twitter. So I'm with that.
And
totally. Yeah.
We're in a day and age where everything is going to be negative. 80% of things are going to be negative. But if you're getting somebody like Danny, who doesn't seem like he blows up at much, coming at you and saying this is unfair. And also at that time, nobody else might have known Danny was an ex-NFL player, but Jeff sure knew.
Yes.
And so if somebody who played a professional sport is complaining about the fairness of your game, which I personally think should be treated almost like a sport, and that it's just, you know, this is how it goes. It's like the NFL. It's just going to go on for eternity. Yeah. You got to take that a little bit more seriously and maybe think, hey, am I jumping the shark a little bit on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but yeah, I like Jeff the real person, I have to say.
I got to meet him and I thought he was incredibly nice in person. It was at like a huge fan event and stuff like that. But the fact that he took the time to talk to every single person who wanted to talk to him at like a big outdoor event. And that was really cool to see. You know, so I appreciate all of that. I was thinking, though, when you're talking about Deshawn and Xander, I have to go back to this before I forget, because that's going to be bad. You voted for Erica, though. What was it that ultimately made you want to vote for Erica, who you felt that you had spent less time with and maybe didn't know as well, than vote for Deshawn or Xander, especially when you and Xander went through everything together?
Yeah. Okay. 2 big top things came to my mind. So I'm just going to say that so that I remember to talk about both things.
Write down 2.
Point 1 is, in general, my logic as a juror was I want to vote for the person who I think played the best game. Right. So like, I think a lot of people have been at me like, you and Xander went through everything together. You know, I was never going to vote based on who's my best friend or like I always wanted to vote for who I thought played the best game. So like fundamentally, I thought Erica played the best game. And so it honestly, for me, ended up not being a hard decision at all over who to vote for. I do also think there's something to be said when you have seen someone's whole game, you're therefore much more into, you see everything, you know, or not everything, but you see a lot. And so I think, especially for Xander, I saw a lot of the good and I saw like a lot of the bad. And especially like on Yasa, I felt like there was so much of the time where from what I saw, didn't know what was going on, that it was always like my respect for him. I feel like there was an uphill battle that he had to achieve for me to think of him as a good player, because for so long I was, you know, I felt like he didn't know what was going on in the game. You know what I mean? So someone like that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. What was the second thing though?
Oh, sorry. So the thing one,
you wrote it down.
Thing one was I wanted to vote for the best player in general. Thing two was the more you see, the more you know. You know what I mean?
Got it.
I would happily delve more into why I thought Erica played the best game if you want now, or I don't know what.
That was going to be my question. I was going to ask if there was like a specific turning point with Erica, either like when you played with her versus saw her from the jury seat, which I would love to hear that.
Totally. Yeah. So I feel like fundamentally compared to most people, I feel like what was interesting about our season is we had a lot of people playing really, really hard, and a lot of people also like therefore making a lot of good moves and a lot of mistakes. And I feel like Erica was extremely, extremely intentional about everything she did. And there was almost no error that you could point to. Whereas Xander and Deshawn both, I feel like, made huge mistakes at various points in the game, you know? So like Deshawn, like actually at Final Tribal, Ricard said something of like, Deshawn, I think your strategy is throwing everything against the wall. And that felt, you know, very, very true. But Erica, I feel like it was clear. I felt that she was playing this like intentional under the radar game, only making moves that made sense, that were right for her. And then that led her into a position where, for me, like, especially after the Shan vote, there was a question of, okay, there was a clear, like, okay, there's a foursome running this game, which is, you know, Ricard, Xander, Erica, Heather. And the main question we had on the jury was kind of like, who's in charge of this? Who's in the decision-making seat of this remaining, you know, power part of the group? And it took a while for that to become clear because, you know, Shan just got voted out, so she didn't really know what was happening. Liana then followed her out the door, also didn't really have much insight. But by the time it came to the Danny vote, I feel like that whole tribal council really, really, for me, was the turning point of like my Erica respect, because multiple things happened in that. So that's the truth bomb, the truth bomb tribal. So like, first of all, that just made Deshawn, I feel like, look horrible. Like it just was like such a strange move, and like just just really didn't play well from the jury perspective. And Erica handling it, I thought played like amazing. And especially, you know, like as a person, like, you know, I took a lot of heat for my pet peeves men on my
we were gonna get into that, Evvie. Don't worry.
Yes, great pet peeve. Happily. But the only thing that really approached that energy was actually of the thing that annoys me. It was kind of the energy that Deshawn was bringing in that moment. And there was a bit more of that wasn't shown. Like, I remember Erica turned to him and said, well, I guess Deshawn thinks I'm a big threat because he is truth bombing me. And Deshawn was like, I don't think you're a threat. I don't think you're a threat at all. You know, like, and it's just like, you know what I mean? And it was the same thing of when Xander said, the jury doesn't respect Erica. Like every time a man said that, it made me respect her more. You know what I mean? Like that's just a gut reaction. I don't like what you're doing right now. You know, but she handled it so well, you know, and she never like got flustered, and she kind of remained in control. And then ultimately the fact that Danny went home was very, very indicative to me that Erica was in charge of that move. Because I knew that Erica had a better relationship with Deshawn than with Danny. And I knew that Xander had a close relationship with Danny. And I knew that Ricard had said in this tribal council that he wanted Deshawn to go home. So it was very, very clear that most people would have been going for Deshawn, but Danny went home. And then, of course, Erica turns around to Deshawn and says, you're welcome or whatever. You know, it's like everything she did was like, I am running this.
Go ahead.
No, and it's just like that's what you're looking for is like who is the power player in the game. And even if it didn't necessarily always show on TV, like Erica was for a lot of the game really the deciding factor, you know?
And one of the things that was most shocking to me was with that moment, how positively Deshawn had been edited prior to that. Because obviously Deshawn and Shan had their situation and their blow up and him blindsiding Shan or not blindsiding Shan, however anybody wants to take it. But there was such like a hero feeling to Deshawn that Danny wasn't getting the personal content until we saw, you know, the story about his father, but it was him. Like he was playing the game. He was in control. It felt like it was his game. It felt like it was his story. And then when I saw that, I said, well, how is Deshawn going to win this? And I think that's something that would be really beneficial to future survivors is to listen to all of our tell-alls ever. Because I think that's something that's missed. And I really mean that. It's only like 400 hours. But I think that's something that's missed. And Evvie, I'm curious what you think about this. But we see such a small snippet of what's happening. They're going to show us the most dramatic part. But they're also not going to show us the parts of the conversation that might actually be more impactful. And I'm thinking of right now, Alexa, Dom came on this podcast after Ghost Island and talked about how badly his treatment of Seb at one tribal council totally screwed him out of the win. And that is ultimately what put Wendell over the top because people liked Wendell more than him after that moment. But we saw such a small portion of that how could anybody who goes out on 37, 38, 39, 40, or 41 have any idea that had such a big impact just from watching the show? And it's the same thing with Deshawn. We saw such a little part, and then we hear it from you. We heard it in Exit Press. We've heard it all the time. There was so much more to that. And it's crazy who – I don't want to say Deshawn was protected because I don't think he was. I think we saw plenty of flaws from Deshawn. But who gets kind of protected by having a more positive edit earlier on that the audience is almost like taken aback or feels like they should be surprised by what's happening?
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think Deshawn is the kind of person where I do think to some degree the arc that was shown was very true in the sense that I think there was a point like right around the Shan vote. I think Deshawn was winning the game. Like I think there was a time where he was perceived really well by almost everybody and had a lot of power and really could have won the game. But I think he just has that personality where he's really, really charming. And he can also, you know, have these like blow ups and make these mistakes in front of everybody that just rub people so the wrong way. And I think there's also something when everyone thinks you're nice and then you say something of not, you know, do something kind of shady and then it like makes it and then you try to go back to charming and it's like, who are you? You know what I mean? And to be clear, I actually like Deshawn is one of my favorite people from the season in real life. Like we're really good friends. But it just he laid it all out there. And you got to see like very much the warts and all. But it is interesting what you said, because I think like it's funny that the audience, I feel like, you know, a sizable percentage of the audience was like Xander should have won. But it's so funny because to me, I mean, Deshawn could have won the game at some parts. So, and I thought it was very interesting that they told the story in a way that the audience was surprised about Xander, but not that surprised about Deshawn.
And Sean's the one who technically got second place.
I mean, got second place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that what's also funny though, and like Alexa and I, we started doing this together in 34, and I was doing this with Will back in 30. I think at this point, Alexa and I had pretty much written Xander off like at Final 14 because we could see what they weren't giving him that they were giving to people like Shan and Ricard and Deshawn. And it felt like, no, it has to be someone over here. It can't be Xander. Xander, while we're sitting there going, wow, what he's doing is so impressive. He had no vote and this and that and whatever. That wasn't being described by anybody except for Xander in any confessional. There was never a point where you or Liana or Tiffany sat down and said, I'm so impressed that Xander was able to survive this. And if you're not saying that as his closest allies and other people who then he merges with, and they're not saying that, that means nobody's thinking it. And that means that it might be the perception of the audience, but it's not the perception of the people he's playing with.
Right. And I think it's really interesting to think about his edit in the pre-merge versus the merge. Because I think in the pre-merge, he was getting a lot of, he would say, oh, I played that really well with Tiffany, cut to Tiffany, like eye rolling and,
Right.
and very much became clear that his read was wrong on that. And I'm not saying that his read was always wrong, but there was plenty of times in the post-merge where, he sits out he offers Erica his spot for the grilled cheese or whatever. And I know a lot of people in confessional were like, that was so annoying and dumb. And they don't show that. They show Xander being like, I wanted to be with the losers, which is a smart comment on its own. But then you have to consider how everyone else perceives it. And I think that was, I think a lot of times, and, that's also the case with maybe some of the decisions he made in front of the jury. Like, I think sometimes his logic actually was pretty smart, but the story he told about it really was wrong. Like, and was like the worst possible way you could present it. Like for obviously the thing that comes to mind is the fire making decision, which like
that felt like a huge culmination.
Exactly. And it's like, I think he's smart. He's very smart. Like he thought about a lot of things. And I feel like it was one of those things where you're doing the loop of all the various thoughts. And like, that's what you're always doing on Survivor is like running the things. But the point at which he stopped and decided this will be the story I tell the jury was the worst possible thing he could have said,
like outsmarted himself kind of.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Outthought himself or something,
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Xander and Deshawn, but you played more time with Xander. Yeah. How did you, so many people were like, oh my God, Xander and Evvie, they didn't work out. How was your relationship throughout it? Because it felt, start to finish, it felt like there was always an alliance there, but the trust seemed to kind of wax and wane.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, we started the game very much on good footing, but the thing is I went into Yasa in general, very much being very afraid of the, like, keep the tribe strong dynamic, and that was my biggest fear going into the game of just hypothetical, what could happen to me in the pre-merge, and then coming on a tribe of 6, which is losing like horribly in every challenge. So that pushed me like right away that I always wanted to work with the women and kind of go for the, make sure that I didn't get locked into any sort of keep the tribe strong situation. So right off the bat, Xander approached me and like, we had a really, really good conversation where I felt like, okay, Xander really wants to work with me. I like him. Like, that's great. But it was very much like, this is a backup. This is like a fake alliance in my head because I know I don't want to like necessarily go in that direction. So I started off thinking like, this is someone I want to work with, but I also am keeping at a distance in my like mind, and obviously going, I'm so distant from him in my thoughts about it that when I go to Shipwreck Island, I like tell Deshawn about his idol and I think he's going home. And obviously that came back to bite me. But and we can talk about that.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question. So
in that. But as Yasa went on, I became more and more thinking, Xander is very useful to me. He has all these advantages. He does want to work with me. I think he's the kind of person that maybe like he was constantly saying that he would play an advantage on one of us, and so, it started to become realer and realer. And obviously we just spent like so much time on Yasa together that you obviously build some sort of, like emotional relationship. And he's a great guy. He really is. But the thing I always felt about him was, it felt like there was some amount of he's putting up a front and I just don't know how much of a front it is. Because I think he wanted to put out like, I am the most loyal, most like naive guy. And it's just like, was very obvious that wasn't the case, but there were just like a few things that were like just super red flags. Like, for example, he said, okay, I have the idol and the extra vote. This was before his idol was actually activated, but he was like, I will give you one thing so that if there's a swap, you'll have something and I'll have something. I was like, great. So it comes time to what we think is going to be maybe a swap, which, never occurs. And I was like, do you want to give me the extra vote now? And I'll give it back to you if it's not a swap. And he's like, I'll give you I have a fake idol. Like, I'll give you the fake idol. And it's like, that is totally like, to be clear, I'm not mad at him for not giving me something, but if you say that you're going to, and then don't, red flag. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Similarly, like he said, like right off the bat at Yasa, like, if we find an idol, let's use it all together. And he like said that in front of everyone and made us all be like, yeah, let's do that. You know, and it's like, I don't believe that you want to do that. You know what I mean? So it's
yeah.
Like, so it was always like, he's saying all these things, but you know, what amount is true? And obviously I was lying to him. So, you know, like I don't blame him for lying to me, but you know, it just, I could never really feel like sure about our relationship.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed like with his bond with you, it was because he was immediately put in a terrible situation. So he didn't have a choice but to try to find some way in. It seemed like you were his best chance. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe Tiff or Liana was actually bonding with him in a way that we just didn't see. But I just think that it's Alexa's got it.
Sorry.
Apartment. But I just thought it was, how would he have played differently had Vochi not gone home? Had it been Tiffany, would he have still been going, no, Evvie, it's you and me till the end? And I think that's one of the great what if. That's the great part about Survivor, is just all the what ifs. And I think that's a really good what if, though, because if Vochi doesn't go home and Vochi's still in the game, is Xander still coming to you saying, no, this is the 4, I'll give you my idol, I'll do all that? We don't know.
Right. Well,
but
and that's why I was
like
never,
he had no power.
Right. And that's why I was never entertaining voting Tiffany out, you know, because I never wanted to see how that what if would have played out.
Mm-hmm.
But also something on that vote. So Xander fully knew that it was going to be Voce and didn't tell him. So I do feel like ultimately he was more loyal to me than Voce, at least at that point in time. But the reason why I wanted Voce to go was because I think that Voce could have blown it up. I think like Voce was definitely coming on to the fact of like, I think Evvie is more with the women. I'm nervous about this. Like, and he tried to get Xander to worry about that, but Xander came back to me and told me like, Voce is being paranoid. He's like annoying me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, great, let's vote Voce out. So I think, you know, I really think their biggest mistake was letting Abraham go. Because if they had, you know, it would, from that moment on, their kind of fates in that pre-merge was kind of sealed.
Yeah, and obviously they didn't get to read your pregame press, but I want to bring this up, and I'm going to do this in a way that I know will get all the clicks, you know, with the headline here.
Yeah.
So reading it directly from what you wrote.
Wow, he pulled it up.
Pet peeves, men. That's the whole quote. That's it. That's the whole quote, right? That's it. There's no more. I have to make sure we get the headlines. You know, that's all. But it's funny because I know you're very smart and you did that on purpose and made that the first word. And that was it because you knew that would get people to start immediately going, all right, what's up with Evvie? What's this deal with Evvie?
Well,
but go ahead, let's hear it.
Something that people should know is that those bios we write in the audition process. Okay. So you're not thinking about what is exactly how I want the whole public to perceive me. You're thinking, how do I be the biggest possible version of myself that's going to get me on a TV show? You know,
and that's the correct answer for
that's the correct answer.
I mean, did it work or not? You know, like,
absolutely.
And I will say that's the kind of comment though that really I just feel like. So I'm involved in like activism and things, and we talk about when you're putting out a narrative, you're wanting to polarize the public, right? And so, but you want it to be polarizing in a way that like you're slicing the public such that a majority of segment is coming with you. And that majority segment is made up of the people that you want. And I think that this pet peeves men comment polarized the Survivor community perfectly. Like immediately all the people that were never going to like me that much, they're out. And other people were standing. So it worked out.
And it's funny because you literally followed up like 2 questions later with AOC as your hero. And it's like, that's another thing that like you are immediately saying to half the Survivor community, like, this is my hero. It sucks to be you. I don't care if you like me. And but I think it was just so funny to read that because there was such a strong reaction. And part of me was like, okay, Evvie's screwed. She's starting on a tribe with 3 men. And if those 3 men, if she makes it apparent that I want to get rid of the men, that's going to hurt her. But it didn't. It actually really worked in your favor.
Well, I think the other thing is, I think people that got mad about that assumed that a person that gets annoyed by men can't work with men. But the reality of our freaking society is everybody has to work with men and deal with men. And that's just a part of living in the world. And it was like coming from a perspective of someone that like the thing I was specifically talking about was like mansplaining and like know-it-all energy and things like that. And it's like, literally, I did a PhD at Harvard. Like I can thrive in an environment built on that. And is it annoying sometimes? Yes. Like, do I know how to operate it within it? Of course, yes. And so, yeah, it was very funny that people, I got like literally my favorite DMs are, I literally got several that were like, Evvie, like from your total randos, like, Evvie, I was wrong about you. Like, when I first read your bio, I hated you, but now I kind of like you. It's like, okay.
We love a kind of like. I mean, that's a huge turnaround.
That's a big deal.
I think also like, again, based on my very anecdotal evidence, it seems like once you got out there, like everyone really liked you. And obviously you're going to get, I kind of hated you and now I kind of like you DMs, but it really seemed like, I don't know, people actually heard you speak and were like, oh, Evvie's pretty dope.
Totally. I really think even like the difference between people that read my bio versus like listen to my pregame interviews, like I think when you hear it in my actual voice, it comes off kind of different than anonymous
and period.
Yeah, misandrist voice on the So I think it was okay.
And I do think too, like, this is great because we always have Adam Klein on this podcast and he's always talking about his casting seminars and all of that stuff. Well, this is the best casting advice you could ever get. You don't need to go to a seminar, but still go do Adam's because we love Adam. But it's the best piece of advice. You need to be the biggest version of yourself if you want to get, because if Evvie goes on there and says mansplainers, that's still going to get a reaction, but it's not going to get the same reaction that men gets.
Yes.
And not for nothing, casting is sitting there going, okay, that is a very controversial statement. That is what we want. Like that is going to mean there are going to be people who immediately love Evvie, which we have one of our patrons in here who does a lot of our podcasts and stuff with us. They're doing the pictures, the same picture from The Office between you and them because they had the yellow buff and everything was the same, the shirt, everything. But they're a huge fan. That was it. And then you're going to get the people who are going to be like, well, if they hate men, then they hate men, and therefore I will never, ever, ever root for them. But you need to be that version of yourself if you want to get cast on Survivor, because there's 9,000 other versions of you at least that are trying to apply for this game. Who's going to do it the best?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You have to think, for anyone out there that wants to be on the show, you have to think like it's reductive, but like, what is the 3-word phrase of like who I am? Like, it's like, I was going to be like queer scientist, like, and along with that goes like, feminism and like, you build off of that, but like, you need to be able to boil yourself down into what is your Chiron going to be and what is everyone going to be labeling you in a box. And that is what the show is. Be yourself, but be the biggest version.
I love I remember when we talked to oh gosh, why am I blacking out? Nick who won David vs. Goliath. He said the same thing. He was like, redneck lawyer. I figured it out and that was it. Like the redneck lawyer meets the queer scientist. Like I like just like the nicknames. Like I think that's great.
Exactly. And then there's always, and then you hear that and you're like, oh, well, they'll never get along. And then the key about the Survivor is that people are way more complex than that. And actually probably me and Nick would like get along great as long as we stay away from, particular subjects.
Well, I was just going to say, that's what I think though is so great about Survivor is that, and I think we saw it a lot during 40 because somebody had put out like, here's everybody's political beliefs on the entire cast of Winners at War. And we're like, who really gives a shit? But at the same time, when that's going out there, you also see people who are in the very blue region, people who are in the very red region, you're watching them on the game and they're getting along and everything's going fine. Time. And I just think that's what's great about Survivor because it really does just boil people down to their bare essentials. How are we going to survive this? How do I get along with this person, even if I don't necessarily agree with everything they believe in or everything they say? And you're not hiding behind a screen or a phone or anything like that. You're literally on an island with just them and you have no choice. There's nowhere to hide from it. So how do you work together? I think that's what's so great about it and why it still works 22 years after the premiere.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I remember when the cast list was like leaked on Inside Survivor, like the rumored, and stuff started coming about everyone, including Sydney. And I think Sydney was instantly very, very polarizing online. And all of my friends were like, oh, we hate her. And it was so funny because it was like, oh yeah, like that is probably what I would feel if I hadn't met Sydney and I love Sydney. Like, you know, like, and it just really was it was clear of like, oh yeah, just cause like I saw her as the whole person and she's freaking hilarious. And I totally, if I had just seen her Instagram, would feel differently. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's the special thing about it.
Yeah. And again, it's the whole being the biggest version of yourself. So a lot of times on social media, people are being a bigger version of themselves than they are. And at least Sydney's no longer polarizing, right? She hasn't done anything to really ramp that up at all. Everybody is just completely in love with Sydney, nothing else. Her post-game press was something. I loved it.
It was fantastic.
It was something. Evvie, that was one thing that you didn't have that Sydney had there was the post-game press. You weren't quite on that level.
On fire.
No, I mean, especially I feel like Tiffany came out of the gate, like also like all my most extreme opinions, Tiffany said times 10, so that I could just be like, you know, I could get back to, you know, beloved Evvie, you know.
What Tiffany said.
Yeah.
Tiffany's the bad person, not me. I'm fine.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about this decision to keep Tiffany though. And I really argued heavily against you doing this. And I knew that for you in the short term, this made the most sense. You had your women's alliance. You now were going to be confirmed with the numbers. Xander had no vote. There was nothing Xander could do. But my argument at the time was, why not get rid of Tiffany, who could really hold you back in challenges, and keep Voce and Xander when Xander still won't have a vote. So you still have a 2-1 advantage over them. And you, I mean, luckily for Yase, just won the next 3 challenges. It didn't matter anyway. But was there any part of you that started to get worried with that? Or did you feel so confident in the group that you had that you weren't worried at all? And had you lost another one, would you have gotten rid of Xander? Or do you think you would have gotten rid of Tiffany just because it's like, well, now we're just running out of people?
Right. So, I mean, honestly, at that second vote, like Tiffany was really never on the table in my mind. Like it really was between Xander and Voce was the decision. Because like, in terms of what you said, you know, okay, you have Xander, and if we were to get out Tiffany, and then you have Xander and Voce, and at that moment, Xander doesn't have a vote, but he could get his vote back at any time. And I didn't want to be in a situation where it was a 2-2 situation that I wasn't sure about. Whereas I felt like if I got rid of either 2 guys, I felt like no matter what, if we Matt singed, I would be one of the 2. Like I felt very like that was my biggest. I mean, the reality was we were losing all the challenges horribly with both of them. You know what I mean? Like horribly. Like, and yes, obviously Tiffany was a big part of why we lost the balance beam challenge, but like we had also totally lost the immunity challenge before that, and we lost the marooning. We didn't even get off the freaking boat. So it wasn't like, oh, like these guys are like, you know, putting the team on their back and like, you know, it was just that calculation wasn't that clear. But so it felt really like we could very well be the tribe that gets down to 2. And my biggest thing was like how to guarantee that I would be one of the 2.
And you felt confident that you were the Denise of this situation, where no matter what happened, if you get rid of Xander next, Tiffany and Liana are going to be fighting for Evvie's vote. If you get rid of Tiffany next, Xander and Liana aren't going to team up. They're going to be fighting for your vote. You just felt that confident that no matter what happened.
I really did. And I think I would have had it, honestly. Yeah. And you know, and obviously like with Xander all the time, he and I were like, we're Malcolm and Denise. Like, I mean, we were saying that, you know, and like it felt, I feel pretty confident that that's what would have happened.
At what point, or if at any point, did you ever consider intentionally doing this, intentionally throwing a challenge?
Right. So I never ever wanted to have to decide between Tiffany and Liana. Like I was really scared of being in that 3 and then having to vote one of them out. Cause I just like felt like I feel really good about both Tiffany and Liana. So therefore it was like always, you know, we could maybe try to throw a challenge to get rid of Xander and not bring Xander into the merge. But what if that's not the last challenge? And what if then there's the 3 of us and then like probably for sure we would lose. And then we have to vote out, you know, one of the 3 of us. So I honestly, I felt really after the Voce vote, I felt so good with everyone. And I felt very, very confident that I was everybody's number 1. So for me, it was like, I want to keep all these people because they all are numbers for me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think I think there is a lot of value to going to the merge with no fractures. Like I think a lot about UA and how like, imagine if 4 of them had gone to the merge, how much that like really could have been a disaster. Like if after the Brad vote, that 4, like JD, who's been like blindside, like Jeannie and Ricard are kind of like it was so much messier. And then there was only Shannon Ricard, and then that's clean, until it wasn't. But so I do think, but it's too scary to intentionally do it. I really think.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people can sit from the couch and say, "Oh, I would just do that. Who cares?" But like when you actually get out there, it does become very scary, because if you do get down to 2, what if they don't swap? What if you don't merge? Right. What if now you're Stephanie and Bobby John? And realistically, if you do get to the Stephanie and Bobby John situation where now there's only one of you and it just comes down to a fire or something, even if you're the best fire maker ever, you have a 0% chance to win the game at that point. Right. Because we saw Stephanie, America's sweetheart, somehow in 2005. But we see Stephanie come out of that as everybody in the audience loved her. But Karor was never going to work with Stephanie because you're alone. And even if you would have been in a swing position for a little bit, there's no real way to integrate and build the relationships the way people who had on day one, especially when there's nobody to back you up or that you can confidently work with all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there's the element of, as much as you're trying to just focus on the game, you are thinking about the TV show. And it's like, imagine how fucking dumb I'll be if I intentionally Matt Sing and then I don't win the game and I like win out pre-merge, or I like, don't make it. It's just like, that's too scary. That's too shitty of an outcome for your overall Survivor game. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be very ballsy to do that.
And the people who normally have the idea to throw challenges normally lose. I don't know if we've ever had
evidenced by this season.
Have we ever had a person who has said, we should throw this challenge, successfully done it, been the one whose idea it was, and then win the game? I don't know if we have.
I think the only person might be Ethan Zahn. I don't remember if he does throw the challenge, but I know it was like talked about. I remember he was thinking of like, we should throw it after the swap. But
against Silas,
But it's blurry on whether that's what actually happened. So is that what happened in that?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's probably the first time it happened. So there we go.
But he was doing it in a much different energy than some of the other challenge throwers. You know what I mean? Yes. That's not a messy. That's a very, very clear cut reason,
Ozzy was close, I guess, in Cook Islands.
I don't know. That was a messy one. Like just
that was a different situation. How much stock did you put in the relationships that came out of Shipwreck Island? Yours and Deshawns, as well as every time someone from your tribe went there, knowing that they had that same experience as someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly do think they were pretty big. And I mean, if you think about it, I think that Liana and Shan's relationship, like that Shipwheel Island journey, was one of the most impactful relationships, of the game. Certainly it had a huge impact on my game, of how close they became from that. And I think it's also like, there's like, first of all, like the actual thing is a much bigger excursion than you see in the show. So, it's like, especially for the ones where it was like right after a challenge and then you're transported and you get to this island and it is so annoying, the hike. Like they really I feel like they tried to show up. It's like so annoying, like hours and it's really hot and you're really tired and you're just chatting with this person and going through this thing. And especially like everyone is looking for relationships, so it kind of was always, I think I did put a fair amount of stock in them. And I know like Xander was always saying like, oh, like I could work with JD or Danny because we like bonded on the island. And obviously I felt so good about, talking with Deshawn. But I think the thing that you have to remember, which maybe I should have done a bit more, is like the overall context in which that person's playing. Like I was never going to like be like, okay, I'm done with Yasa because I'm friends with Deshawn now, and obviously I did do that a little bit in terms of Xander. That's not smart overall. But I think they were really impactful. And honestly, I think, going back to like production decisions and things like that, I actually like, as someone who, I lean towards more like a pure version of the game, but like I really liked everything in the pre-merge twist wise. I know like TV wise, it was annoying because there was so much time spent on like literally explaining the prisoner dilemma and all that stuff. But like game wise, what I find the most annoying twists are ones that it's just like a random thing that just like fell out of nowhere and then like, has a big
like an hourglass.
Like an hourglass,
Okay.
for example, or you pick a freaking box and maybe one of the main characters of the game goes home. You know what I mean? Like, versus what I liked about the whole like Prisoner's Dilemma Island thing was that there was always a social dynamic involved in getting an advantage, and like you had to read the other person and like figure out what they were going to do or like decide what they were going to do. And I liked the element of like everybody had a sense of who could have what. Like I feel like it was just a much more social way to have the advantages other than just like, oh, a guy found a thing in a tree,
Yeah, and it's replacing the obviously missed swaps. Like it's making you all have those relationships because otherwise you wouldn't. Right. I was also I'm down with the butterflies. Like I thought that was hilarious. I think it was so stupid that it was funny, but I think that there's a lot you can do with it. And I hope they keep it going in like a couple different capacities. So I'm with you. Pre-merge, I totally get it.
Yeah, and I think it is like it's always cooler to have advantages that people know are there because then you can see people strategizing around them. And obviously it sucked for the people that had idols that everyone knew about them, but it was so much more fun to watch people scheme around the idols that who has them than just like, oh, that person was gone for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that Alexa and we complained about was the one that Brad pretty much woke up with. That was like, weird. And who was it on your tribe that got?
Yeah, and Tiffany was the same thing. I mean, it was literally just sitting in the fire pit. But
that was stupid.
Like, that was stupid. But at least then they still had to go there and like feel each other out, and like you at least had like an interesting social. I think the worst part of that was that none of those dynamics ended up mattering at all because like Brad immediately went home and then Sydney.
Yeah. My favorite thing was when Tiff and Sydney met each other and immediately hated each other. That was
so funny.
TV
and then
gold.
They liked each other again when they reunited the merge. It was so funny.
So hilarious.
You know what's so funny with that? So Tiffany actually came and we watched the 3rd episode together. She came to Boston and she watched it with my friends and family. And she literally at the commercial break after that was like, I still had no idea what the rules of that were. Like, did I get us a tarp? And I was like, no, Tiff, you didn't.
No one got a tarp.
Yep. Yeah.
That's so funny.
It was compelling, and I think it was fun. It's more fun than just watching people walk around, pick up something, trip. Lauren O'Connell thought it was a sock, like things like that. Like that's not fun. But it is like then all of a sudden they hit the extreme where it's like the hourglass twist, and you're like, okay, why though? Like, why did Sydney? And it was almost you.
Why
did Sydney or Evvie deserve to be screwed over at this point in the game when they won? You won the challenge, and so that was obviously like I think that was the biggest turning point for everybody. Where then it was like, whatever you do from here on out, you get no benefit of the doubt. Everything else we just hate about it. But what were you feeling in that moment? Because I know you already, Danny was very vocal in his disgust for this, but you already threw Danny under the bus here. So what were you thinking though, especially since this was almost your chance and you would have gone right before the merge, just like Sydney did?
I literally can't even tell you how crushed I would have been. Like, I wouldn't have made the freaking jury. I'm like, I was playing so well until that point. Like, but no, honestly, for me, I think Danny was extremely, extremely hung up on the like, he's the competitor and we won the challenge and we lost. And like, obviously I agree with that. But to me, the part that like really, really killed me is that for 2 days I was strategizing thinking that I had immunity that night, and you play very differently when you know that there's no risk of you going home on that vote than thinking that you're one of 6 people, 5 of whom Ricard then wins immunity. So it ended up being that there was 4 people all in one tribe and me, and like those are the people that you can vote for. So I feel like my entire like merge strategizing was messed up because I had a false perception about what my safety was that time. You know what I mean? So for example, like the whole thing with Liana trying to come for Xander and pulling away from Yasa at that time, like she was coming to me with like, is now the time that we get Xander? And like, oh, fine, you don't want to do Xander. What if we even do Tiff? Like she was telling me that she wanted to basically flip on Yasa, and me thinking I have safety, I'm saying like, no, let's not do that. Whereas if I knew I was vulnerable, I'd be like, sure, we can vote
whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like you play differently when you think you have immunity. And I know that all of us were playing so differently. And like, me and Deshawn were continuing our, relationship. And like they obviously showed that I told him, about the idol, and he like truth bombed like me in the tribal council. But like also he had been telling me Sydney and Danny are too close. Like it makes me nervous. And those are like his key allies. So then when it gets flipped around, I start, telling them, Deshawn doesn't really trust you as much as you think. Like all the flow of all the information was off because we didn't know who was actually vulnerable. And that sucks because I feel like even though I did stay, everything about like the hourglass was still the beginning of the end of my game because like between my strategizing then was like wrong and I kind of like ended up putting myself in a bad position that way. Then I get truth bombed. Then I have to like help mastermind this crazy, idol move, which puts all eyes on me. And it was just like from that, I never could get it back. And all of that was because of the hourglass,
And I think, I appreciate you saying all of that because I think that was my biggest argument during this entire episode. Like I just threw my pen at the wall and I pretty much said, I'm done. Like I'm not doing this anymore. I think I missed the next podcast, right, Alexa? I think it was
I carried the team on my back after that one.
I really did throw like a little baby fit. Like I was so aggravated. But what I was getting annoyed with was I was trying to argue that like this isn't just a one episode thing. Yes, Sydney, I will honestly say, and I know that she is so polarizing on the internet, so I know that this isn't a popular opinion, but I don't care. She is probably the most screwed survivor in the history of the entire game because she never once lost and she went home. Literally. Nothing she could have done. She went home. Now, granted, she could have not played the shot in the dark. I understand all that, but she didn't do anything wrong from the sense of she never lost a challenge. She should have had immunity every time, and she didn't, and that's ridiculous. And she's not like Bill, who gave up immunity. So, for his tribe or whatever. But I think that's what was the most frustrating aspect of this was it screwed you. It screwed Deshawn. It screwed Danny. And granted, Deshawn and Danny were able to rebound from this, but they also still had a tribe of 5. That was still available that really didn't have much anger towards each other. And so they were able to rebound a bit from this, but people don't look so much at the long term of these. And I always go back to the best example is when Malcolm went home in Game Changers. It is so great in the moment, and it is one of the most short-sighted twists in the history of the show because now you got rid of Malcolm, and everybody hates Game Changers because look at our final 8. Like, it's just – this was so short-sighted, and while it created a lot of drama in that moment, do you or Danny win the game if this doesn't happen? Does Sydney win the game if this doesn't happen? We'll never know, but it just feels so ridiculous that this – you didn't really recover. You went next.
No, totally. Yeah. I basically did. And also it totally like, I hated that it was like, we just got to the merge. Like it was so interesting. Like the idea that you would need to put in a twist to like make it more interesting. Like it was crazy already from the fact that you have 12 people all coming together and just, it was like, you had this like swirling pot of like really interesting chaos. And then it was just like, even the starting premise that only 6 people would be vulnerable, let alone if they knew it the whole time from losing the challenge. It's just like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, let this play out. Let this like organically, let's see what happens when these 12 people come together, and I really feel like there was definitely a world where Ua and Yasa teamed up against Luvu. And I think that like the fact that it ended up switching and then all the Luvu people were vulnerable, they then like shrunk back together. But like that was not what was going to happen. You know what I mean? So like it really changed everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what it didn't change was the past. So like time travel, I don't know. Like
the memes from that were truly incredible. Erica like switching everything. This to jump like an episode ahead. Did you know you were going home? And if so, did you ever consider playing your shot in the dark?
Right. No, I will say in the moment, I didn't think I was going home. I really did like, and I mean, the thing is, I think, watching it back, everyone has seen how much time I had with Xander, and I guess I never really finished answering your question originally about like what my relationship with Xander overall was like, because the thing is at that time, after the whole, knowledge is power. Yeah, no, you can have this fake moment, which was so awesome.
That was awesome.
It was so awesome. After that, like really Xander basically never talked to me at all in the next cycle. And like he was telling everyone he's furious at me for the for telling Deshawn about the idol. And I had never thought that he was actually as like emotionally mad at me as he was. I think he was kind of like using that to tell people like, I'm not with Evvie anymore. You saw what they did to me, but obviously he was probably some amount mad, and like I did betray him. So I really felt like going into that split tribal. First of all, I thought that was like the worst group of people I ever could have. Like when I pulled the rock, I was like, I'm going home. But then as it went, like when I, as it went, like the thing is I felt better about Deshawn in that moment than I did with Xander. Like when I got voted out, I literally was like, not sure, was it Xander or Deshawn that flipped on me? Because like, I just was like, Deshawn and I really had been like, you saw the scene where he comes to me and like, we shake hands, I'm never going to vote for you. And like, the thing is also, I didn't know that Shan, Liana, Deshawn, and Danny explicitly were like, we are doing a Black Alliance, like for the culture, for the community. I didn't know about that. So like, clearly like with that context, the idea that they would have flipped on Liana at that vote, which is what I was trying to get Danny and Deshawn to vote out Liana. Clearly like, that doesn't make as much sense if you know that there's a deeper meaning behind it. But in the moment, I was thinking, Shan and Deshawn are clearly about to fall apart. Like this is clearly not going to continue. They're not going to continue to work together. Why not, take out Shan's right-hand person in Liana? And Deshawn, we had been talking about that all day, about like that this fracture is coming. So anyway, all this to say is like, I thought that when it seemed like Danny and Deshawn were on board, it like did make sense to me that they would maybe be interested in doing that. And like, to be fair, the next vote, they voted Shan out. So I don't think it was like crazy, but watching it back, it's like, when I pulled the rock, I knew I was out and I was out. So like,
And so like, do you think, obviously like this is just totally, all over the place, but with the fact that you would have won the episode before that with Danny and Deshawn, was losing there, like at first, so you win, you're the immune group. Now you feel like, are you bonding with them? And then once you find out you lose, now you have to just immediately start cutting them off. And then that kind of ruins any chance of growing a relationship with them, even though you did say you felt comfortable with Deshawn, but still kind of coming across as a little two-faced because you really have a choice.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because like, I really wanted like Deshawn and Sydney were the two people on like that I felt I really wanted to work with. By the end of the merge cycle, right leading up to the challenge, I was thinking like Tiffany and I ended up both having really good relationships with Sydney. I already had a great relationship with Deshawn. The two of them had a good relationship and Danny seemed great. So I was very much like, it would be wonderful to work with these three people. And then the fact that then we had to basically all come for each other, Sydney goes home, mine and Deshawn's relationship. So there's the element of our relationship was strained, and there's the element of because of that, he therefore extra solidified working with Shan and Liana, which I think, and you'd have to obviously ask them, but I think when they first were discussing it, it was a lot more like, okay, that's an option. I've got these other options. But then when the lines came down that way, obviously Deshawn was fighting for his life and is like, okay, done. This alliance is very real, and so it solidified all these things in a way that they weren't necessarily going. And I think absolutely, like me and Deshawn and Danny won all three of those like we won the merge feast together. We then won the grilled cheese and then we won the stew. Like we were together a lot, but it was just always in these situations where it's like, well, one of us has to go home,
Yeah. And what would your, this is so hypothetical, but what would your take be if Jeff or the producers were to say to you, like, don't do this post-merge or do this post-merge? How do you feel about splitting up tribes post-merge? Not in terms of for rewards, that's always been done. But in terms of like how you went home, and not just because you went home that way, but do you think that this actually adds anything to the game anymore at this point? Or do you think it's better to just be like, hey, if you're going to do a double boot, just make it a double boot episode? Or you think this is the better way after playing it?
I honestly didn't like it even before it was the time when I get home, and now I hate it forever, obviously. But I just don't like it because I think I feel like the fun twists are the ones where it makes it so that the minority, like the underdogs, can somehow like pull one over on the majority.
Mhm.
And with the split tribal, like I see how like hypothetically it could work out that way, but I feel like more often than not, the majority ends up in the majority on the small groups. And, you know, so like I think back on some of the previous people that went home, like Missy and Aaron, like two like powerful players in that season went home, like Michael Yerger, like they're powerful players, but they were not part of the, Michael Yerger, like a powerful underdog goes home. Like, I think that's kind of, you know, the slot I fell into too. And it's like, you just make it really easy for someone to get like sniped out. Like, I remember like Danny said to me, he was like, we felt like it was a big move getting you out. It's like, are you kidding? It's like, I'm like a lion at the zoo and you like, are like I hunted a lion. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Those double tribals too. I don't know how often it affects it, but I remember, I think Missy had told us this when we talked to her. When you see that like the person who gets voted out is on the jury, that next group that comes in, they're like, hold up, what does that mean?
And Naseer was shocking.
Yeah,
right.
totally.
Right. Well, you know, and the thing is, Naseer wasn't as shocking to me as it was. Like, I think like Danny and Deshawn, they were like freaked out. But to me, because the two of them had been always saying that Naseer has to go. Like, and I think they were also a little perturbed because they were like, that was our person that we wanted to get out, you know?
Yeah.
But like, so to me, I was like, because I left that night seeing that, you know, Naseer went home and then me. I thought like, oh, Shanna's just going to like run this game. Cause I felt that Naseer was someone that was like soon going to get out from like Danny and Deshawn always wanted him out. So his name was are always out there. So it kind of felt like to me, like that makes sense-ish. You know, he seems like someone that would get out soon. And I thought that Shan was just going to like run the table from the rest of the game. I was really hoping that Naseer, Erica, and Heather would take out either Shan or Ricard. That's what I was like so wanting to see when I walked in there. And the fact that it wasn't one of them, I was like, okay, this isn't. But then Shan went out the next time, so what do I know?
And so a couple things off of that. One, I really wish that in a 3-tribe start, they would just do the 2 tribes that lose and get all their double eliminations out of the way there, and then just make it single eliminations for the post merge. Because at the end of the day, nowadays, post merge is what matters. I mean, that's what we're all focused on. That's where we start to get the Ponderosa and all that stuff. That's where the people are going to be returning to the game soon. I think just speed through the early part and get to the part that, you know, you want to dwell on a little bit more rather than rushing through an episode where you lose Evvie and Naseer, who are 2 of the more popular players on the season. I don't know. I just think that's weird. Totally. The second one, though, is if Ricard, and you were on the jury for a long time by this season's standards, even though you were there for 9 days, despite being the 3rd member. If Ricard gets to the end, do you think Ricard pulls it out against anybody, or would it have mattered who he was sitting next to more than we believe?
I think he definitely would have always, like, he was obviously a contender against everybody. I do think Erica still would have had a shot. Like, I think it really depends on, obviously, it's like, if Ricard got to the end, that probably means he won the Final 4 challenge, which would have been a great, like, you know, addition. That would have meant he won, I think, 4 immunities, right? So that's obviously very impressive. But like I said, you know, at the beginning of this, it was really starting around, like, Final 6, I was getting, like, really, really impressed with Erica. So, and that was even when Ricard was still in the game. So, and Erica was just so amazing at Final Tribal. And it was so clear that, like, clearly Ricard pioneered the Shan vote. But from then on, he was in an alliance where it seemed to me like Erica had more power in that alliance than him ultimately. And he then was winning immunities and keeping himself in the game and things like that. So I think he definitely had a good shot. And I think, I know I've talked to like Danny and Deshawn, and I think they've both said that they probably would have voted for him if he had gotten to the end. So I think it was also possibly one of those things where there might have been a split between the earlier jury members and I only saw Ricard win 1 immunity. You know what I mean? And it's just like the idea of like, he's the challenge beast. Like, I just didn't literally see that. So it just didn't have as much of an impact on me as like Danny, who's a professional athlete that lost to Ricard 3 times or whatever, you know, like.
And a lot of people, it seems like in recent seasons or in past seasons, if they start playing too late, they'll get knocked at the final trial for like like Dean. I always think about Dean.
You had
And
a hot
being
streak.
like, why didn't you start earlier? What were you doing before this? Name something you did. Do you think that the pace of play in the shortened days, the fact that you're only playing 26 days, you're the third member of the jury, but you and Nasir voted out on the same night. You're there for only 9 days. Do you feel that that actually is going to help the people who are later bloomers in the game and want to start, playing their game a little bit later, and there's not as much of an urgency to be in control for so long post-merge?
I think that's possible. I think the other thing is when you play a late blooming game, with any game, at Final Tribal, you need to explain your game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think especially for an under the radar game, like what the thing I was going into Final Tribal thinking was like, this better have been intentional. Like, it can't be, oh, I was sitting around and then I found myself in a good spot. And then I started, and I think that's what Erica did the best on of, whether it was true or not. And it seems from her pregame interviews, it very much was true that she was like, I came in with a plan to be underestimated, to be under the radar. And I did it like, X, Y, and Z. And at this time, you know what I mean? It has to be a plan. And so I think I obviously wasn't there for Dean's Final Tribal, but I think if you can't explain that, or you try to say, oh no, I was running the game the whole time when you weren't, I think that's where those games look really bad. But for someone like Arya to come in and say, this was an intentional strategy that I have, and it very much, she articulated it so well, that I think that has a really big impact,
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay, my next one, because, and Alexa, I know we're not supposed to spoil this until like the end of the podcast. But since we're talking to him on
one piece of thunder,
I know, I'm sorry. Since we're talking to him on Monday, we got to get like a take on him, because Xander didn't talk too much about him. But where was Danny at during all of this? Because I felt like Danny was playing a very under the radar game. Alexa just said, fuck you, Evvie, I'm out of here. She said goodbye. Sorry for the F-bomb, everybody, but that just shocked me beyond belief. She really hates Danny, I guess, and just wanted to get out of here as fast as possible.
She wants to be under the radar. We just talked about it,
Sorry, Alexa. I didn't mean to bring up Danny before.
I was so annoyed that I noped my way out of here.
But so I thought it was incredibly impressive that Danny, being this huge guy who is clearly physically fit, he's on a tribe that wins nonstop, doesn't really win immunities and is getting 0 votes. But I couldn't get a feel at all for if he made it to the end, would he have gotten votes, and who were his relationships other than Deshawn? What was your relationship like with him out there? And was there ever really a chance for you to work with him at all?
Right. So, I think the biggest thing about Danny is that everybody respected and loved Danny as a human. You know what I mean? I think he's probably one of the most universally just like, he just comes off as just such a good guy. You know what I mean? And like, he gives off that kind of like, he gives off that thing of like, that he's a straight shooter, but not in like a dumb, I'm just going to like say it's like a very just like honest, good. He just gives off like really, really good vibes. So everyone had like warm, feelings about him. But I would say in the game, especially for the part that I was there for, I felt like it's like, what is Danny doing? A little bit, you know what I mean? Like, and especially when you compare it to Deshawn, who's like so actively playing, it made it seem like Danny was not playing very much. But in retrospect, watching it back, I think Danny was like, saw his position in the game very clearly, that he was in a very good spot and didn't want Deshawn to like mess that up with all the things he was doing, and was often the voice of being like, no, that's a bad move. Let's stick this course. And let's stick this course because it's going well. It doesn't seem like active play, but I think it was a lot more intentional than I was like reading from him on the beach, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in terms of like once I had won that immunity challenge and I was in the game still, that morning, I was really trying to make inroads with Deshawn and Danny and the entire, and like Shan and Liana as well. And it felt like it was working. Like I literally had a conversation with the 4 of them of like, you are 4 of my favorite people in the game. Like, I really want to work with you. And it was starting to happen. And then it just obviously then got to the vote where I ended up going home. And Danny literally said to me, like, because it was clear that like at one point it was clear that we were maybe coming for each other. And then he tried to convince me he was coming. He was like, so much for working together, Evvie. Like
we tried.
We wanted to, but like, yeah.
And Alexa, I just have one more on this Danny thing, and then I swear I'm done. And then it's all you the rest of the night.
No, I actually didn't even have a question. I had just like like a point. Like you hear that a lot where people want to work together, but the timing just never really comes to be.
Totally. And I think the thing about Danny is even in all his pregame stuff, he's saying like, I want the puzzle people to be the threats. Like, I think like we had the like antithetical strategies coming in. So then when we ended up like, we love each other again, like he's so fun. But it was just like, he was always viewing me as the kind of person he needed to get out. And so that was just never going to work. But just on your point of like, had he gotten to the end and all that. And I think the thing that is hard to like, Final Tribal, I think really does have a big impact. And I think he's someone that could have made an amazing case for himself. Like when he talks, you want to listen to him. You know what I mean? And so I do think like, especially when compared to Deshawn, who I feel like was very like defensive at Final Tribal, which really didn't play well. I think Danny could have like stood proud in a lot of the things that the two of them did together. And I think it would have, I think he certainly had a shot. And I also just don't think that Shan and Liana were as mad at Danny as they were at Deshawn. Like they definitely felt very betrayed by both of them, but it didn't have quite the same
it's probably the benefit of seeming like the number two to the number one.
Yeah, exactly.
And you pretty much took the word, you pretty much answered my next question, but I just want to throw it out there anyway. But somebody like Danny, who does play he is the exact opposite of the game that you were going to play. He's got it, but then he comes out and he does play under the radar enough that he doesn't get the votes just because. Like how we see Joe Anglem, no matter what happens, he's going to get the votes just because. And we see that a lot with the big alpha male type players. They're going to get the votes just because. Is there a way for, so like at least in your eyes, as somebody who's never going to play that game, as somebody who's always going to play a different game, is there a way for that person to like play a game where it's like, yeah, there's no way we couldn't vote for you at the end? If Danny just played the under the radar one that got him no votes despite only winning one immunity and he got all the way to final 6, or you have Joe who, the Joe type who pretty much no matter what they do, they're just going to lose as soon as they lose immunity. Like, is there a way to do what Danny did, but maybe do it in like a way where it's like, no, you get to the end, there's no way we couldn't vote for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Danny was really on the path. I think he's somehow like I really, really do wonder what would have happened had the Black Alliance not broken up when it did. Like, I really don't think the 4 of them were ever going to be the final 4. Like, I just think the dynamics were so like tense within them. But like, I do wonder what would have happened if that had broken apart a little later, because I do think, I mean, you could see a situation where Danny is much more palatable for a lot of people than Deshawn, but they both, did make a lot of good moves. So I think like the way that Danny played it of, you were never going to think he was weak or lazy or not a member of the tribe or like any of the things that a non-physical person might have against them. He was always going to, have a lot of ticks on those boxes when it came to Final Tribal. And I think and he was, part of a lot of moves. I think it just needed, I think he needed to like pop a little more at some point, but I think that totally could have happened. Like if he had gotten out Ricard, toward like in that final 6 like area, if he'd somehow gotten someone to flip there, I think it was possible.
I think also doing a little bit of like taking a little bit out of what Erica did, and from again only as a viewer, I feel like at Final Tribals, it obviously your answers matter, but I think your confidence in yourself really matters. And if you own like, I was an underdog, I purposely did this, people are gonna respect that if they respect
right. And I didn't even like, because I'm part of like, you guys are watching at home thinking like, how is no one thinking of Danny? I was part of the people not thinking of Danny.
Yeah.
If Danny had said, look at me, how is it freaking possible that I made it this far and you guys didn't see me a threat? And like, and again, had said like, that was a strategy. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that has like, that would have been very impactful for him to say that,
When did you find out that Danny had played in the NFL?
Oh my God. I found out at Ponderosa. So at Ponderosa, when it was just me, Tiff, and Nasir, they were both very much like, I think he's NFL. And it was something that like in the pregame, I saw him and I was like, because I was just in general thinking like, I wonder if someone's a celebrity, and like he was definitely like in the category of like, he could be. And there definitely were like red flags in his story, but I just like, I don't think about sports. Like, it's just like, he said something like, because he was saying that he was a youth football coach, which he actually does do. He like runs camps. And he said something of like that the kids always like want his autograph. And I was like,
Oh.
And I was like, really? They want your autograph? He's like, oh, well, they don't know the difference like between NFL.
Yeah. What's so special about you?
Right, exactly. And I was like, I don't know. That could be true. Like, I don't know. So yeah, that's the other thing is like part of his potential winning game is like he was always talking about like he just had a baby and like that made you want to give him money. And then it was also like, wait, but if he's a professional NFL player, maybe I don't want to give him money. So, that's definitely.
And again, like I didn't want to turn this into like the Danny hour here because that's going to be on Monday. But I always love when people are playing a completely different game than what the archetype is expecting. I think like, that's why for me, Todd Herzog is such like a great winner. And I know he was one of the people you mentioned in yours, as people you would play like, but he completely changed the way that people in the Todd archetype play Survivor. And I feel like Danny was very close to being able to turn what the alpha males did. But he was doing it on such a unique season where it just was like, he really was sticking out like a sore thumb every time you all lined up to get ready to do a challenge. And I'm looking at him like, he's about 6 inches taller than everybody else there.
Right. And I think the critical thing that we've been talking about is like, he has the self-confidence that he could have gone in and said, I was intentionally doing this, And I think something that like I've seen Xander in interviews saying, that he was trying to like come off as dumber than he was or things like that. But I don't think he didn't quite have the confidence to say, you thought I was dumb. I know you thought I was dumb, but I'm not dumb. I feel like he didn't want to go the step of even putting it in people's minds, like to consider that they thought he was dumb, even though he was like trying to do that to some degree. Does that make sense? It's
does.
I think he just doesn't. I think part of his age and all that like he just doesn't have that confidence of himself to be able to kind of like articulate what was happening, and also to some degree maybe like the awareness of the perception of others. But like also like someone like Ricard kind of happily accepted like, oh yeah, I'm the biggest threat. Like, what I mean? He kind of like, like didn't seem to mind that too much, which definitely was the reason why he therefore got out, and so I think having that confidence in yourself to be like, I know I'm freaking Danny McRae and it's fine that they're talking about me. Like that is a sweet spot,
And I almost feel like Ricard was playing against type 2. I mean, Ricard's not somebody who you're going to just automatically think, wow, Ricard's the biggest threat. But once he starts winning everything, he has to start announcing, I'm the biggest threat here, because he gets to the end. He's telling you, you can't vote for anybody else. I was the biggest threat the whole time. And you still didn't vote me out. Like it seems like, and so along those lines, like what would your plan have been had you been able to get a little bit deeper into the merge in terms of what you were going to try to have others perceive you as?
Right. Well, so I was very much like, and you see it in the tribal where Tiffany went home. I made this whole speech of like, the Yasa is dead. Like they were going to let me die. Like they didn't play the idol for me. And that is how I, felt to a large degree. And so I was really trying to just be like, I'm a lone person that's going to just like, I'm so scared from everything that happened that I'm going to just roll with the numbers for a while. And that is literally what I was going to do. But I also was very much trying to like, it felt to me so clear there is a storm brewing between Team Deshawn and Team Shan. And I felt like Deshawn and I had such a good thing going that I was very much going to be like, I'll roll with you. You know what I mean? Like, let's do this. Like, I'll be there as someone that, and I do honestly think like, Deshawn voted Shan out and then he was at the mercy of everyone else because of the way that split went down. I wonder what would have happened if he had done that move and I was there as someone that he was working with really well, but was like a major threat in the game that everyone always thought. So I was really trying to just pitch myself in all these different boxes. But I really was trying to be forgotten about for a while because I felt like I had enough of a resume that if I popped back up later, I would have the respect,
Yeah.
Especially as you watch the rest of your alliance, especially once Tiffany goes home, then it's like, okay, we're one short now.
Yeah.
What do we do? Like, so I think, it's so fun. I mean, when you actually went out there and what your plan was, and everybody dreams of what is my perfect Survivor game going to be, but what your plan was going out there and then how it actually went down. Were there any things that really surprised you with like, wow, I really can't control this, or, oh, I never thought I would ever have to do this or pull out this side of me? Was there anything like that happened?
I mean, so much, like so much. I mean, my game was literally like inverted from what I expected. Like I really thought like I'm going to be so in trouble in the pre-merge because I'm weak. And then like at the merge, probably people won't think I'm a big threat, and it was just like none of that. And the thing I really thought was like, I was always like, I was working out, but I was always like, if it comes down to a challenge, I'm already gone because I'm never going to win a challenge, So the fact that I did like, I won a challenge and it was like the thing where it's like everyone is coming for you and then you win the challenge. Like I never, ever, ever thought I was going to do that. So that is definitely like a highlight for me for sure.
That's awesome. Evvie, you also, one of your other highlights during a challenge was they quickly showed yay tattooed on your leg.
Oh, yes.
I love the yay.
Flexibility. Yeah. Yes. Yay.
I saw that and I was like, is it just yay? Like, is Evvie just like pumped? Like, I thought that was hilarious.
Well, it's yay with the rainbow flag, obviously.
There we go.
The story of that comes from so I think you've kind of got a sense of me that I like to put it all out there. And so about a year after I came out, I threw myself a 1-year anniversary of coming out party, which I highly recommend. And whatever the thing is in your life that you were once nervous about, throw yourself a party over that because it's so fun.
I love that.
And it was so fun. And it was just like a big celebration of like my queerness. And it was amazing. And I had like a big rainbow flag. And my friend brought these balloons that said yay. And it's actually, you can see a picture of this on it's like my Twitter banner picture. And
Phil has seen it 100 times because he stalked you relentlessly.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And that sentiment of like, and this is something that was so much a message I wanted to have on the show is like, I think for so long the narrative was, first of all, being gay is bad. And then being gay, like maybe you can get to like acceptance or tolerance, right? And it's like, it can be okay. Like, and that was the thing I was always thinking in my life is like, oh, it's going to like be so bad. Will it be okay? And then it's like, it's not okay. It's freaking yay. Like, it's the best thing. You know what I mean? It's not just like, cool. Okay, like life goes on. It's like, no, it's awesome. And it's like a great part of me. And so like, I really like, that is a message that I just really, really believe in. And it's like, was so fun that I got to bring my ankle with me on Survivor. You know what I mean? Because I had that reminder always.
What a sentence.
Bring your ankles. Don't forget them.
Don't forget those. That's awesome. That's some good energy. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, and I think a lot of people caught it, which was nice also. I'm glad they showed it.
Yeah. It wasn't hard to see at that point. But is there anything else? I know we're coming up on that 8:00 hour here. Is there anything else that we haven't covered here that you are dying to get out there for anybody who's listening?
Wow, great question. I don't want to forget something important.
And if you do, everybody will know that it's your fault and not mine.
Exactly. Okay. Well, two things that I feel like are just not that known, but I think are important. Like just Nasir flipped his vote at the vote where Sydney went home. And Nasir saved me in the game. And I feel like they just like, it was too complicated to
totally
explain.
Glossed over that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But so if you see, it was like guys voted Evvie and girls voted Sydney, but Nasir voted Sydney. And so I think
because Deshawn used the 2 votes.
Right. Deshawn used the 2 votes. And I feel like people were very confused of like, oh, so the majority decided it was going to be Sydney. But no, the majority wanted it to be me. And between Nasir flipping and Sydney playing her shot in the dark, Sydney went home instead of me.
Wow.
Yeah. So huge love forever for Nasir. And it was like a social game situation where like he and Sydney did not get along and he and I had a great rapport. And so he flipped his vote. I wish they had shown it because I feel like it was confusing to people of like, so why that, I mean, the whole thing was confusing.
Yeah.
That's like the most important thing. I feel like this has been said in other places, but like before the challenge where Erica then turns back time, Liana showed me the entire knowledge is power instructions and like came clean about that whole thing to me. And that's just for my own self. I want that to be out there because I just think it was like, I figured it out of how to beat that. Okay. I want people to know that I had the critical information. And then it was like, obviously a huge team effort. I mean, all three of us, like, you couldn't have done it without Tiffany finding out. You couldn't have done it without Xander, like, really executing on it. And then I was like, I had, you know, the info there. And I think also, like, ironically, on one hand, it's like, Liana, how could you have thought that I wasn't going to do that since you knew that I knew? But it's almost like because she told me, she thought that like we were so good that I would never think that she would think that I would think that, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's a lot of layers of that going on.
Well, I'm glad she showed you, because that moment was awesome.
And that is a perfect example of why it's so fun when the advantages are public, because like, it's so fun when you get to like figure out how to beat them and like all this stuff. Like I remember when the Knowledge Was Power was shown, and then it was like the cliffhanger episode, everyone on the internet was like, that's so dumb, and like it even says you can't lie, and like how it sucks that there's a thing that you can't break, and like the whole time I was like, haha, we beat it, like, you know, and like that's the fun one. So yeah, but Xander crushed the execution. Like I'm not trying to I just trying to
you know,
like,
I remember watching, and I was wondering, I was like, if this ever happens again, and if I have a knowledge power and I don't tell anybody, and then when you like reading it out loud, like that you can't lie, that must be so frustrating as the person being like stolen from. But that would have been a really cool moment to be like,
well, it was crazy. They didn't show. So like, she says the thing, he says, no, you can have this fake. And Jeff basically like pauses and is like, just so you all know, I know that is the truth. Like, you know, like he is not like, he's like, I can confirm like that is true.
That's so true, because Jeff does have to butt in there because it's something you can't lie to them.
Right. Production has to know. Like,
yeah. And he's giving her something, so it can't be the thing. Otherwise, like, you can't lie to production as you're also being told you can't lie.
Right. Which is, it's definitely, they get themselves in a little tricksy spot there. Like, what if someone is just like, no, I don't. Like over like,
what do you know?
Like, actually, that is the real one, and then it turns out, well, actually, that's the fake one.
Right.
You know, the real one's in my pocket. Thanks for blowing me up, Jeff.
Right. But Jeff is too intimidating. You can't lie to that man.
Can't lie to him.
Well, no, this was a really good conversation, and it was a lot of fun, and even though you're both from the same tribe, much different than the Xander one, that's for sure. Xander was doing his in his freezing cold car down in Key
Florida.
West. So, you know, just saying.
You know, he always drives from Chicago to Florida. Like, he's crazy.
That's like very far.
I've driven across the country 4 times, Evvie. So 4 times across the whole country. So I like it. You know,
I liked that.
I did 4 times, like in the summer, since they're like, I'm telling you,
that's weird. Yeah,
that's true. I liked that video that someone posted. Xander like parachuted into someoone's front yard or something like that.
Oh, I saw that.
I didn't see that. Hilarious.
He's wild.
That's awesome.
Maybe that's the ultimate butterfly saying hi. You know?
Wow.
But
well, Phil already stole my thunder. So we have a very special guest coming on this Monday. And if you couldn't guess, it is Mr. Danny McCrae. We're really excited to have him on. He is going to be joining at 8 p.m. Eastern, so a little bit later, knowing that it's a holiday on Monday. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. I haven't checked our Facebook in months, so just Instagram and Twitter. If you want to become a patron, we are actually not us. McKenna, who is our Evvie doppelganger on the Private Specialists, is running an amazing race podcast, so tune into that. And Evvie, this has been so much fun. We're really excited that we were able to have you on.
It was so fun. Thank you both. I loved it.
This was awesome. Hope you can have some dinner soon. I know we kept you kind of late.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you Monday.